nanotechnology to become useful or products. And again, how the body becomes a grow bag almost. Richard Jones talks about Brownian motion, about how already cellular machines in our cellular makeup already deal with this so effectively, and also how the body already grows these things so well. So, yes. And here I have some speculation, some imagery of how the body might be able to grow this stuff. Just as warts, human papillomavirus is very much growing on our body, how it spreads, and how when something starts, how do you know when to tell it to stop? And once it's out there, how is it controlled as well? So there's all these ideas of, legislation, who is it intended for, who has access to the technology, and how might they use it differently to its intention. And if that's happening in the lower social economic scale, I always like to think about what's happening at the opposite end. So if the body is being used in a particular way, and viruses are a commodity, producing something either legally or illegally, then how is the body seen in terms of the rich if the poor are doing this? How are natural protection systems of hair, of grooming, entering beyond aesthetics into functionality? And it's all fleshing out these ideas of technology obviously is this thing, but what's the belief systems that are diverting it? Because technology hasn't a will of its own. It's very much up to humans to direct it. And then into the future. So that's very much a speculation side of things. But I've been lucky enough to join a couple of biotech-type workshops. This one in Stavanger in Norway, led by Oren Katz from Symbiotica in Melbourne. Perth, sorry. And I've recently just finished a kind of a short course with Cambridge University in synthetic biology. So again, the next stages of how I might bring this into the reality, I think is really exciting, especially getting my hands onto synthetic biology, which seems to be the next step. But it's always a kind of a frustration of how I can access to make some of this stuff. And going further, so in terms of synthetic biology, and perhaps I'll just talk briefly about synthetic biology. I'm sure you probably all know about it. But it's very much taking living systems already in E. coli, inserting other desired genes into the plasmid of the E. coli and then creating new functionality. It's often talked about as being the next industrial revolution. For me, I'm really interested in how organisms, when they're used in terms of industry, how we relate to them differently. So in the UK at the moment, there's a lot of talk about how going back to industry will bring us back out of the recession. For me, I can't see this next industrialization to be the same as before. And so what will it look like? In terms of synthetic biology, it will have a very different feel to it. We'll have to have different regulations and different acceptability to how it might shape our world and how we relate to it. My next thing, because I can't access readily labs, I moved to perhaps how we use insects in terms of industrial processes. And here there's a cyborg beetle. So already these insects are being adapted and changed by us. And I've done a number of small experiments using, for a start, mealworms, which are the larvae state of darkling beetles. And mealworms are quite fascinating. Well, I find them fascinating. They're used in the pet food industry, and to make them extra big, they've been fed a hormone so they don't pupate until a lot later on, so they can grow to these massive lengths. And they're sold quite readily for pet food. For me, it's already here, it's already happening, how we live alongside and treat these organisms. When they're used in industry, I'm questioning what we might do, how they might be adapted, and what they might make for us. And then, so they have a life cycle. So when they finally pupate, what happens? Going back to maggot therapy, at the moment, when they're used in hospitals, they're used to clean the wounds, and then they're incinerated. For me, I like to perhaps think of more symbiotic ways to live alongside these organisms and invest in their life cycle. So for a patient, perhaps having maggot therapy, I love the poetic kind of feel of they're fed from your body, they go through their life cycle, and then they leave the body. And likewise, that rehabilitation after an injury, the process of metamorphosizing and healing. So this idea of metamorphosis is something I'm really interested in and following through. Interestingly, I used mealworms to create this object here, and through the process of using them to carve out the form, again, after the mealworms leave, you get fruit flies that come in next, and then through my observations, fascinatingly, you get colonies of spiders that then come and feed on those fruit flies. And I'm fascinated by how then this enters into this big network and chain, which for me, I think is really important to connect back into those systems. And maybe the loss of contact with the cycles kind of has got us into quite a lot of mess in the past. Which brings me back to this, and again, maggots. So in terms of how we fit into here, the carbon cycle, by using synthetic biology, in, I feel, quite a poetic way, through GFP gene inserted into the E. coli, and then exposed to break down perhaps a human relic, a human heart, during our dispersal, our breakdown, how it then enters into the food chain and how that can be mapped out, and to give us a sense of where we fit within these bigger systems. So yeah, and which I did some experiments with that, using the maggots to carve out the heart from its encasement, and then the relic afterwards. So after the insects have left, to enter into a food chain, what you have as a memory of that process. And I think I'm going to leave it there. So thank you for listening.